Hey Darren, thanks for hanging out today. I'm looking forward to be able to connect and hear a little bit more of your story, and for our church to hear a little bit more about your story. And so, just for everybody to get kind of a context, a little bit about you, can you share a little bit about your work experience, your professional background, and kind of what you've done?
After around 2017, I started a company with some other friends. It did okay, and after that, I actually joined full-time ministry. I actually wanted to start another games company. But at the time, our lead pastor, Andy, invited me into a leadership offsite with the team. And that's how I got connected into Echo at a really deep level. So since about 2018 or so, I've been in full-time vocational ministry, either at Echo or with a nonprofit that we had started called Salt+Light.
Yeah. So what was your journey as far as in tech, innovation, startups? Like you did quite a bit in there.
You know, I would say I really found a home in the games industry. Spent a lot of time in there. I love games, played them growing up. I've done a bunch of other software companies as well. I've been involved in that at some level. But games is where I really found a home. Skill-wise, I spent a lot of time doing game design, and then eventually went to product management. And that's really where I found the right rhythm of my career and skills that I started to develop in tech.
And what was your background in faith during that season?
Dude, yeah. Okay, so I think it's important to know that I actually didn't start, so I'm 39 now. I didn't start following Jesus till I was 31. My mom, when I was younger, she taught me about God when I was like 7 years old, but we didn't really do anything with it as a family too much. My mom's side did have a religious faith and an upbringing, but my immediate family, we didn't really practice by any means. My dad grew up Catholic, but again, didn't really practice. Weren't really, I think the language that I would have now for that is we weren't really following the Lord. We weren't really surrendered to Jesus and trying to live life the way he was asking us to live. So I'm married, I have a kid, and I just remember, I'm kind of really unpacking my faith story at this point. And I remember sitting at my wife's Korean congregation, because I'm Filipino, my wife's Korean. And I was sitting there going, man, I don't know if I even believe in this stuff. I'm not sure what to think. And again, I didn't even have language for it at the time. It wasn't until later that I'd recognized it was God really knocking at the door and asking me to understand the man of Jesus. So I went hard on that for like a month. I was commuting from San Jose to San Francisco. I did that commute for about 10 years. So I had nothing but time in the commute. It was like an hour and a half, both ways. And you just sit there, listen to podcasts, read Audible books, listen to all these apologists. I started exploring other religions to get an understanding of what was going on. And at the end of it all, I'd recognize more and more, man, Jesus seems to be very real. And no matter what I choose from here on out, there's some level of faith in me that needs to make a commitment and go, in faith, I'm going to step into this. Yeah. So I don't know if that even answered your question.
No, totally. So what was the next step after that? Like, obviously, you gave us a glimpse of like your journey from work to then working in ministry vocationally. Mm-hmm. But so now you're exploring faith. How does that transition then for you to eventually come into ministry?
Yeah. I think the big thing there is, let me actually continue from where I just left off. So I make the commitment in faith. I'm going to step into this Jesus thing. I'm going to say, all right, if you're real, let me invite you into my heart. Let me start to follow you. And what happens when you go through that process and you're really surrendered to that thought, Jesus just shows up somehow. Yeah. So your life starts to change. You start to receive revelation over how you should think about your marriage, how I thought about myself as a father, how I thought about myself even as a son to my own earthly dad, which is a large part of my story and upbringing. So the more I stepped into Jesus and willingly tried to follow him, the more he'd show up in my life, and it was amazing. And I think what that practically translates to is he'd start to convict me of things that I once didn't really consider or I thought I was over. Back to my dad, I thought I was kind of over it. It's no big deal. Time heals all wounds. And I didn't realize how much weight and baggage I was carrying from the past that manifested and brought itself into my future, into my present. Yeah. And I had to go on an entire journey to understand and receive healing around all that. So, when you step into it, God shows up in all these really cool ways. And what does that do? That emboldens your faith. It encourages you. Yeah. It makes you recognize that Jesus is more real he's more real than ever. He's more real than he was yesterday. So if you were to ask me, like, do I have more faith now than I did before? The answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't conclusively prove it all, but I know for certain that I am more strong in my faith than I am today. Long-winded way of kind of getting to the heart of your question, your most recent one, which is, I start pursuing Jesus. I'm just on fire. It's so fun. By the way, if you're watching this, following Jesus is so fun. Just have to get that out of the way. A lot of people think it's this thing that puts you in bondage or there's a bunch of rules you have to follow, but dude, it's so fun. It's such a joy to be surrendered to God. So you're sitting there, I'm surrendering it, and next time I got invited to join a group. Join a men's group, 6 a.m. They met at like 6 a.m. at some cafe in San Jose. Next thing you know, I was invited to be part of Alpha. Hey, come host a table at Alpha. I was really thankful, by the way, for all the personal invitations that people made in my life. Those invites to me, all I did was say yes to them, but if the invite didn't come, I would have never said anything to it because I didn't even know it was available to me. So groups is a huge one that I really anchored in to explore my faith, and not just explore, but to learn more about Jesus. Yeah. And then the transition to ministry came. It's a journey. I would have been too afraid probably to step into full-time ministry at Echo if any of you guys had approached me. Felipe approached me right out of the gates and said, hey, why don't you come work at a church full-time? In fact, when Andy said that, I was actually, my initial gut feeling was like, I'm good. Like, no thanks. I'd rather do this tech stuff. It seems like it probably pays better. But I'm thankful that I was in a space in my walk with Jesus that I knew I needed to pray about it. Yeah. So I'll stop there because I'm sure
I'm curious also, like you talked about like the things from your past that you feel like Jesus, in your walk with Jesus, that were revealed to you that you were wanting to bring healing into. And obviously that's like out of things that were out of your brokenness from before. There's a flip side of it. Like there's things from your past that maybe are like your experiences, like we talked about the startups that you've helped build, the gaming stuff. How did you see that translate now? Like you're living in faith as a Christian, as a believer. How did those things merge together for you? Like, how do you see that connection between that skill set and talent and this like innovative spirit God's given you and your faith?
Dude, I mean, I sat up because I'm like, wow, this is an exciting question. There's so many ways to tackle this. I think the first thing I want to acknowledge is that even in the space where I wasn't following Jesus, when I reflect back on my life, he was there. Yeah. He was there in the celebrations, he was there in the sorrows, he was there in the joy, he was in all of it. And it's not like God is surprised about those experiences. Like he knows that I've crafted this journey for you. And there's a distinct goal he has over my life where my job is to partner with him and co-create and move into that. So I would say that, as a game designer, you're effectively building a world. You're creating a world that players want to join, players want to go into, players want to be in, and they want to dedicate a lot of their life into it. You have to be pretty innovative to make a very fun game, a game that people truly enjoy, and that's awesome. I didn't realize how, I never really spent the time to think about the innovation horsepower required to do something like that. And when I stepped into full-time ministry, all I could think about were the heuristics I had developed in tech, in games, and think about what we could do to bring them into church and redeem it as best as possible. So even as I am now in the ministry that we're doing with Salt+Light, much of how we're designing that product is rooted in gamification and what makes a good game work. So that's one of the coolest things. I think another thing I want to share to this is embracing the idea that God himself is the greatest designer ever. Yeah. He is the creator of the universe. I remember reading somewhere, I can't remember which major theologian or even Christian scientist had said it, but it's something to the effect that it's a miracle that the world even makes sense to begin with. So when you sit there and dissect the rhyme and reason to why gravity works and why this works and why astrophysics works, it's a mystery to why it's a miracle that it even makes sense.
The fine-tuning of the universe.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And I think there's something really cool about that, where God is the ultimate creator, he's the ultimate designer, and he's asking us to advance his kingdom with him. Yeah. He's saying, come partner with me. Let's build this together. I think the thing I hold in tension to that is, and it's not necessarily tension. Maybe I would say it's a little bit of a fear where I do recognize that in some ways God doesn't need me to do it. He tells Peter, on this rock I will build my church, and in some ways it's indicative to this idea that Jesus is going to build it with or without us. So we have an opportunity to join him in that.
Yeah, he can find another rock.
He can find another rock.
Yeah.
He can choose another path, choose another person. If he's put something on your heart and has asked you to live some sort of dream out, maybe it's an entrepreneurial dream, maybe it's a restaurant you wanted to start. A lot of times we ignore those prompts. We don't even pray through it. We don't invite him into that equation. And what I've recognized more and more and more, it's that he's actually, those thoughts, oftentimes if they're righteous and redeeming thoughts, it's God breathed and he's trying to get you to do something with them.
Man, when I think about like creators, innovators, like through all of history, the church was like a pretty big part of that. Like all the Renaissance guys, like all the hospitals that were created were made by believers. The biggest universities in our country were created by followers of Jesus. Like what in your opinion, like from your perspective, what do you think is the role of people in the church or believers generally when it comes to being creative, innovative, like pushing the envelope?
Man, when you asked that question, I took a deep breath because there was a part of me that is a little sad about how that once was. And that isn't to say that there aren't followers of Jesus now doing some amazing things and great things. I like to think of those stories, the hospitals, the educational systems, the things that were done by followers of Jesus. Man, those stories are so inspiring for me. One of our purposes as a follower of Jesus isn't to hyper-personalize this gift of the gospel in our heart and just keep it to ourselves. Yeah. We have to go out. If Jesus has really changed your life, he's like, first off, you should do some self-reflection and even exploration to allow Jesus to completely transform you. And when that has happened, pray that the Lord would give you the boldness and courage to share it the way that he's designed you to share it. Your innovation may be to open up the doors of your house, your neighborhood, invite 10, 15 people over for a barbecue, and just share the good news and live life with them. It's not, sometimes we make it this like, oh man, this guy invented like AI and ChatGPT. It's not that. Yeah. It's doing the thing that isn't yet done in your culture, in your community, in your network. And if that's what's happening in your own neighborhood, where actually the mayor of San Jose spoke a few weeks back on this, that one of the biggest epidemics that we're facing is loneliness. Yeah. So what innovative way can we solve that? It's not going to be a tech play. Yeah. The tech is just a tool to get people into community with one another. So there's many ways that we can innovate an invitation into someone's house. So I wanted to use that as an example of, it's not about, a lot of times we confuse the technology as that is the innovation, but sometimes innovation is actually a change in behavioral pattern for ourselves, a renewing of our mind and our heart to do something that doesn't conform to the pattern of the world, but to do something that's truly innovative and pleasing to the Lord.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. What do you think is stopping us from doing that more?
Oh man, I'd imagine a lot of the feelings I have on why I don't do it is what people also share. It's scary to open your home up. It's inconvenient to my wife and I, Grace, my wife, we host this, just make that clear. Grace, my wife, we host this Friday night Sabbath party, and we've been doing this for about a year and a half. It's a lot of work. I was sharing with you earlier, the first 6 weeks she was cooking everything. We were cooking everything. It's a lot of effort, and we have to clean, and a lot of people help with that. But there's logistical things she has to send out. We have to organize that spreadsheet, all of it. That's an inconvenience, man. If you're busy, if you got kids, if you got a very demanding job, you don't want to put yourself out there to do that. It's hard. So my encouragement to people is, it sounds very cliche, but you need face time with Jesus. You need to seek. Oftentimes you'll hear us worship these songs that have lyrics like "Show me your face." You want to press into that Because in the midst of seeking Jesus, he will bring revelation, he will bring wisdom, he'll bring encouragement, and he'll convict you. I know for certain that there will be people hearing this that have been convicted to open their doors up or to do something innovative in that sense for a very long time, but you haven't done it because of insecurity, of fear, of all of that. And my encouragement would be, well, go seek Jesus and ask him for the courage and the boldness and the time and the space to make it happen, and just do it.
Yeah.
We had this one saying, I'll end on this, is that we had this one saying at Rocket Games, the company I was at before: do not let perfection be the enemy of good. A lot of times we feel like, I even felt today when we were setting up that, oh man, the house is a mess, I got to clean up, like, man, I didn't know we were doing it at my house. But dude, like, if I was beholden and I ensnared by that idea, we'd still be cleaning this house. Like, taking care, we wouldn't have set any of this stuff up and having this interview right now. So a lot of it is a just do it attitude, but first seeking God's spirit and his heart in it all, so that he can encourage you through that process.
I think often of like having kids, there are so many things that are like transitions with children that feel so daunting and overwhelming, but you got no choice. Mm-hmm. Like when you have babies and they nap, but then they start having less and less naps, you're like, how am I going to handle them not napping anymore? But as you do it, you get used to the new reality and the new format. And you just have to kind of take the leap, right? Yeah. With kids, you don't have a choice. But I think in life, with other things like getting the habit of hosting or reshaping your life in a different way, you have to start somewhere and allow it to become the new norm, and then it becomes normal.
Yeah. Pastor Felipe, I feel like, teaches on this subject so well, where I'll never forget the language he used to help with marriage. And he would say, you have to fight for your marriage. You have to fight to go on date nights. And that is the right verbiage. It's not easy. You have to fight for it. If you recognize you and your wife haven't been dating in the last month, there's probably a good reason for that, most likely. Kids could be one of them, maybe a new job, maybe there's something else in a personal life that's happening. But nonetheless, you must fight to make sure that marriage stays healthy and you go on regular dates.
Nobody else is going to make the space for you.
Yeah, wow, super good. Yeah.
To change course a little bit, by going back to the innovation thing, God's called you to something pretty special that you're working on through something called Salt+Light. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how it's going.
Yeah, I think, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to share a little bit of how it started, because I think it's important. I'll preface this with, I had never expected to ever work for a church. And I had never expected myself to do a startup that is ministry focused, ever. And here's what I do know. In a lot of people's lives, the way we think, dreams are either birthed or crushed. For me, one was birthed during COVID. And what I had recognized during the season of COVID was how people viewed church. If I say church, what comes to mind for people?
Old building.
The building. Yeah. The building, the pews, the chairs that we sit in.
That smell.
The smell. That's what they're thinking about. Yeah. I think at the deepest theological sense, not that I believe this to be true because I tried my best to study it, the church is the body of Christ. It's those who have received Jesus and it said, you are Lord of my life and I'm going to follow you. That is ultimately the church. And that does something for me where I now recognize that the church that I go to, the local church I go to, Echo.Church, it's this local ecclesia where a body of believers come together and we worship, we fellowship, we edify, we do those things. But ultimately, it is my responsibility, not yours or Pastor Felipe's responsibility, to share the good news of Jesus with my community, with those in my life, with my family, with my friends that I grew up with. That's my responsibility because you don't have connections to them. I do. Likewise, people who work at the Google or Trader Joe's or the Facebook or Home Depot or whatever, God has you there for a reason, and you have to view it as a ministry. So I'm painting that picture because that's almost the genesis or the impetus for starting Salt+Light. Is that us, as far as a Jesus, we have this thing that we do, and this is maybe indicative to the Western church just today, where when I invite you to come to church with me, and you say no, I kind of stop. That's it. And I actually, in some ways, allow my local ecclesia, my local church, to monopolize evangelism in my life. But the thing is, that's my responsibility. I need to embrace that. I've also recognized that, well, that's kind of the way I've been equipped. We say it on Sunday. Hey, invite a friend, invite a friend. Hey, everybody, keep inviting friends. They should come to Echo. But if they say no to that, dude, it doesn't stop there. I love jujitsu. Hey, come train jujitsu with me. I got this Friday Sabbath thing with Grace. Come to Friday Sabbath. There are other inputs in your life that they can say yes to. And when they experience your life as a follower of Jesus, they're experiencing the salt and light of Jesus through you. They're experiencing church through you. So that was a big paradigm shift for me. And that's the tool that we effectively wanted to build. We wanted to build a tool that would help supercharge and activate disciples to go off and be the church and invite people into their life. Hey, go invite them to church, but they're saying no that. We'll invite them into this group. Invite them into this cohort. So this is what Salt+Light is. It's a community where you can go on a journey together, and that journey helps you overcome whatever season of life challenge that you're facing through a lot of fun gamification things that we do. So imagine instead of maybe doing just a book club, you can do a marriage course, you could do an entrepreneur course, you can do a conquering depression course through Salt+Light within community, and where you have this space to develop authentic personal relationship with one another.
That's awesome. So what's the big vision then? Where do you see it going long term?
Yeah. The vision for Salt+Light for us, and I know we sound crazy, but it's very massive. When you look at, for us, there's a clear problem. Like here's a thought exercise. Ask yourself this question: are we as a society trending more towards a direction where we're in life-giving relationships with one another? Are we trending towards that direction, or are we trending away from it? I believe if you just look at the stats, especially around loneliness and depression and anxiety, we're probably trending towards a direction where we're not deep in community and in authentic personal relationships with one another. And that is the problem we want to solve. There's a massive void with deep, authentic personal relationships. So when you ask what's the vision for Salt+Light, we want to be the number one tool that people use to enter a community of others where they feel safe, where they feel welcomed, where they can learn about how to overcome their season of life challenge in deep, authentic personal relationships. And that to me is a huge play. It's the antithesis of what a lot of social media is today. Social media, it does some great things by allowing us to stay connected at the top level, but it's just the top level. In some ways, that's just the surface. If you think to all of the times where you've had some of your most awesome, life-giving conversations, they didn't happen on a comment or a TikTok video or whatever that may be. It happened typically in person within a group of people that you trust and respect. You might disagree with, but you trust and respect them, and you want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. Well, hey, we're cheering you guys on with what you're doing with Salt+Light. Keep pressing into your gifts and innovating. We're cheering for you guys as a church and for what you're doing through your ministry, through your gifts. And thanks for spending the time and sharing with our church your heart behind this. And I hope people are inspired to be a part of it with you.
Dude, thanks. Thanks for having me.